Welcome to LabMinutes.com. In this video, we'll look at the second method of performing a NAT on a Cisco ASA starting version 8.3 and later. It's called Twice NAT. In the last video, we looked at the first method, which is Object NAT. So here we look at the second method for Twice NAT, and Twice NAT can pretty much do everything that the Object NAT can do and actually more. Because if you look at the command syntax here on the page, our NAT statement, which looks very similar to the pre-8.3 syntax, it allows you to define both source and destination on the same command. So if there's any policies or conditional NAT that you need to perform that require you to specify a source and the traffic that goes to a particular destination, whether or not you decide to translate the destination IPs or not, you can specify everything in a single command, and once it get match, that's what the ASA will use for the translation. So the way the Nat Matching works, in the NAT table, there are 3 section 1, 2, and 3, and section 2, as we talked about in the last video, is for Object NAT, and the section 1 and 3 is reserved for the Twice NAT. So with the ASA trying to perform a translation, it will go from top to bottom in the table, and for particularly section 1 and 3, as soon as it finds a match, it will basically just use that one NAT statement that you configured. Unlike the section 2, there can be 2 separate matching process, one for source and one for destination. So you have to be a little careful if you have a destination translation or destination NAT defined in section 2, but your source happens to match something or a NAT statement in section 1, it may not perform the way that you might expect it to. So here with the NAT command, you have the real interface and the mapped interface. The after auto is for you to specify if you want to put the NAT command in section 3 or not. So after auto is for X section 3. And you can specify which line you want to put your NAT in. So for Twice NAT, you have to manually insert it, unlike section 2 or Object NAT, that things gets reordered or put into order automatically for you. So for Twice NAT, there's a line option for you to specify which lines of the config you want to insert your configuration into. Then you specify the source translation, whether it's type dynamic or static. And then you specify the real IP, mapped IP, and on destination is always type static, and that will specify if you want to translate the destination or not. And here's services for the PAT or the static PAT. Okay, so scenario is pretty much the same as our last video with the Object NAT. So you can see how things can get accomplished in 2 different ways. So let's get started. The setup is pretty much the same. We have multiple loopback on switch 1 that we can use for a source ping, and then there's a loopback on R2 that we can also use later for translate destination NAT. Okay, now get started with the configuration on firewall 1. And just to show you, this is left from the last lab that we already have an access list configured for the inbound traffic. First, we're going to define an object network. So you can view a Twice NAT as the object inside the NAT, as opposed to the Object NAT where you have the NAT inside the object. So when you configure Twice NAT, you always start it off with defining whether it's an object or object group, depending on if you need to be able to define or groups the object network together or not. So here we're just going to do a straight up for our static NAT here, straight up object network. 32.32 host 172.16.32.32. As you can see, I embedded the word real in there, so it knows it's going to be used for the real IP. With the object network, then we're going to have the one that's mapped 32 host 32. Now we're going to put them together with inside, outside, source, static, Actually, let me step back and show you the different options. So you can see you can tell which line you want this to go into. If you want to go in section 3 or not with the after auto, we're just going to do source, and you have an option dynamic or static. So source, we do static, and then starting with the real. And then mapped, which is here. And it lets you put description at the end if you want. If you want continue and putting a condition on the destination IP, you can do that too, as well as performing destination NAT. You can specify if you want to do a DNS fix-up. You can temporarily disable the NAT rule using inactive in case you want to troubleshoot without completely removing your NAT statement. No proxy ARP is to individually disable proxy ARP on that particular NAT IPs. You can force it to do the route lookup using the routing table instead of using the interface as coded within the NAT statement for routing. Services, we look at that a little bit later for our static PAT, and unidirectional, you can force the NAT to be unidirectional, so there's no outside in, only inside out as far as the traffic initiation. So here we're just going to put DNS, and then we're just going to do description. So here we can call something called Static NAT. Okay, I already have believed ICMP debug running. So in switch 1, I'm just going to ping 1111, source loopback 0. Can ping, and the IP show up as 11132. Okay, so show NAT. Show you, it show up right here, set section 1. Line number 1, you get 5 translate hits. Okay. Again, that was the host NAT. Now next we're going to try a network static NAT. So do show NAT. Let me remove this, and then define a couple more new objects. So object network real. Here we're going to do a range of IPs. 252. Since it's just 4 IPs, we're going to try subnet this time instead of range. 32, 32, 252. Second is object network map 111.64.252. You can see I like to hard code as much information as I can into the name, so it tells me that it's starting 64 and it's size 4, or 4 IPs in that subnet, /30. So subnet 111.64.255.255.252. Put that together in a NAT statement. Source static. I'm just going to copy to prevent typo. Real and map. So you can see the order is pretty logical. You start with the source, then the real and mapped IP, as opposed to the pre 8.3 where it's inside outside. The IP kind of flipped over to be like an outside inside IP in a sense, but here it's everything. It's from the real to map, or inside to outside, following the order of the interface you specify in the parentheses. So you're just going to go enter. Show NAT. Okay, entry is in there already. It's ping. Went through right away. Now show up as 1.64, which is the first IP in the subnet that we specify, and then we're going to try from loopback 1, which is 32.35, 3 IPs away, and again the NAT shows up as 3 IPs later, which is 67. So we know our NAT works just fine. And show NAT, you can see 9 translate hits. Okay, so that's for host and network static NAT. Next we're going to look at static PAT or port forwarding. So here we got a a TCP port involved. So let's start off with an object again, network. The real IP is 172.16.32.37, host 172.16.32.37, and then you got an object network map to 111.37 with the host 111.37. Next, we're going to specify the object type service to deal with the TCP ports. It's a real TCP 32, and that would be service TCP source equal 23. I'll telnet. Next, we do the map to service. Just map to TCP 2323. Service TCP source equal 2323. Next, we put them together in a NAT inside, outside, source, static. Everything followed the same process with the real IP and the mapped IP. But in addition to that, you have keyword service here. So you're going to do service. It tells you to start to do the real service first, type object. So that would be our real TCP 23, and then followed by the mapped service, which is map TCP 2323. You don't want to do unidirectional because it kind of defeats the purpose for the traffic service to be accessed from outside. Nothing else you need, so enter. Now from R2, we're going to try to telnet to 111.37.23.23. Came up right away. And if you look at show con, our connection, see our connection stays up with port 23. Show NAT. And you can see there's one untranslated hit. Because the traffic comes from the outside, everything gets untranslated to the actual service port on the inside. Okay. So that is for static PAT or port forwarding. Now we're going to do dynamic NAT. Start off with object. With the dynamic NAT, we're going to try to we're going to use 32.39 as a test IP, and we should be choosing or selecting IPs in the round robin fashion from the NAT pool of 96 through 98. Here we get NAT pool with the range of 111.96.111.98. With the object network real 39, host 172.16.32.39, NAT with the inside and outside. We are definitely doing a source NAT, and then instead of static, we do dynamic with the real IP. And again, since we just have one IP to test with, we just use the host command. If you have a subnet, you use the subnet or range. And then you assign it to a map pool. NAT pool. And just do DNS. I always like to do DNS because there seems to be no harm of doing that. And if there's a need, it's already there for you to use. Okay. So now we're going to do ping source loopback 3. Ping went through, hop R2, it shows 97. Show xlate, and you can see it used 97. Okay, clear xlate, and do ping again. Now pick 98, show xlate. And you can see it shows 98. If you want to do it one more time, clear xlate, ping, Go and pick 97 rather. So there you go. Show. Let me look at show run object. Okay. So it goes in the round robin fashion, picking the IPs from the NAT pool. They do show NAT, and there's a 15 translate hits for that. Alright, next up we're going to do PAT and PAT pool. So first we're going to start off with conventional PAT with a single outside IP to use, which is 128. Object network 111.128 with the host of 111.128, and then you go object network real 41 through 43, and here we're going to use range 43. Oop. No, 43. Okay. Put that into a NAT statement. You can see that after you've done this a couple of times, it kind of sink in and it becomes your second nature, and you don't have to think twice as far as what you need to do. Here we're just going to show you a keyword, an option after auto, just to show you what it's going to look like on the NAT table. So after auto, we're going to do source dynamic, since it's a PAT, and followed by real IP, as always, and then to mapped IP. Here. Okay, and there's a bunch of options you can do. You can do description, you can specify whether you want to do DNS or not, fix up or not. You can do PAT pool, which we'll look at in a second. Or you can do service. Here we're just going to do DNS. Okay, and the two IPs we're going to use to test is 41 and 43, which is loopback 4 and 5. So ping source loopback 4. Ping went through, and let's try 5 also. Also went through, and everything came in as far as the R2 is concerned is 111.128. And to look at more detail with the show xlate, see there's 1.432.41 gets translated to 128, and 32.43 gets translated to 128 as well. Okay, so that's for conventional PAT. Next we're going to look at the PAT pool, and if you have not watched our video, a previous video on the object NAT, so basically what PAT pools allow you to do is, instead of what it used to happen, is if you specify multiple IPs to use for PAT, the ASA would not use the subsequent IPs until the previous IP is exhausted from all the ports. So if there's a need for you to somehow utilize multiple PAT IPs while those IPs are not actually exhausted, then PAT pool is what you need. And that PAT pool is also available with the Twice NAT. So let's modify what we did. Do show run NAT. Okay, let's delete our last command. So we do not use that. And we're going to define a object network map 111.128 through 129, and that would be a range 111.128 111.129. Oh, I kind of left off a 1 there. There you go. And we put them into the NAT command. We can do after auto again. Okay. Then we do dynamic source dynamic and the real was real 172.16.32.41 through 43, and then the map did. Let's take a look at the option. Here you can specify PAT pool with the range of IPs that you want to use for the pool that we defined already. Here you can do description or DNS fix-up. You can make an extended entries to also, you can see it said extend PAT uniqueness to per destination as well, not just the source ports. So you can make an extra entries or actually extended entries that includes that destination ports. You can do flat, so it utilizes the whole range regardless of what source port you're coming from. And you can make it inactive. You can do round robin, so it's going to round robin the IPs instead of picking it sequentially. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do both flat and round robin keyword. Okay, switch one. I'm going to try telnet this time. Source loopback. I believe he's 4 and 5. 4. Password is Cisco. Let's see. Who? So here, see it picked 111.128. So exit and try it from 5. And now you see it's coming from 129. So it round robin the PAT IPs from the pool. And you do show xlate. See, here's the first PAT entry with mapped IP of 128. Here's the second PAT IP, entry with mapped IP of 129. So the PAT pool works no problem. Okay, next we're going to do Destination NAT. Here, Destination NAT, gets a little tricky because you need to also, not only that you need to specify, unlike object network or object NAT rather, specify the destination mapping, you also need to specify the source NAT as well. So it takes into account both source and destination for the destination NAT to happens. So here we're just going to go with object network mapped. We're going to make loopback 0 on R22222 appear as if it's the IP 172.16.96.32 on the inside. So 96.32 host 172.16.96.32, and then you have another object network real, which is the real IP on the outside 2222, and the host 2222. Okay, here we're going to do a NAT inside and outside. So for source, we're going to say anything that needs to talk to that particular IPs, we're just going to pad it. So source from any to an interface. Okay, with destination static of, let's see, let's say the mapped IP first, that's still on the inside, so that would be map, and then the real IP on the outside, which is real object. Okay, so just going to stop there. Do show run NAT. See, it shows up at the bottom. So here, since the destination translation or NAT comes into play, it doesn't really matter now, according to this particular configuration that we did, the source IP where it's coming from, regardless of all these statements that we specified earlier for all the loopbacks or IPs that we used to test, as long as it matched that particular destination condition. Let's see, where you go, right here. Dynamic entry destination. Yeah, as long as it matched that particular destination condition, that this NAT entry will be used, regardless of what's coming on top of that. Okay, so let's show that to you. Cisco, oh, hang on, let me get out of that. Okay, just to show you that we can use any IPs we want to test. So we can try to ping 172.16.32.96 source from loopback 0. Oh, actually it's 96.32. 96.32. See, that went through and show up as 111.252, which is the outside IPs of the ASA. So you can see it bypassed it totally ignored the static NAT entry that we had configured earlier for that IP. And just to try it one more time, we can try from the Dynamic NAT one, which is 39, and that's loopback 3. So ping loopback 3. It works. It's still coming into R2 using the same IPs, and it totally ignore show NAT. Although the order of that is the which one is that? It's number 4 in section 1, and we have a source Dynamic NAT for the 32.39 in order line number 3. It's totally ignore that and jump directly to the destination, as long as you have the destination NAT specify. So it doesn't really, it kind of breaks the rule a little bit when you talked about the NAT supposed to happen, or the ASA does perform the NAT from top to bottom and finding the most specific, the first entry actually, the first entry that match. It's always true for the source when you only deal with the source translation, but as soon as you put the destination translation or destination NAT into the mix, it kind of bends the rule a little bit. So just look out for that when you configured destination NAT. And I did not show you earlier when we specified the PAT pool or PAT that we use the auto or after auto keyword. It puts that into section number 3, as you can see, so it goes right at the bottom of the table. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to look at is Identity NAT, which is kind of straightforward comparing to what we have done so far. The object network, real 172.16.32.45, so Identity NAT on our diagram here. The source is 172.16.32.45. We're going to keep it the same. And with the host, 172.16.32.45. Again, Identity NAT is just a static NAT with the mapped IP the same as the real IP. So all you need is just one object network. The source static, you can just basically map real to real, and you're done. And to show you that you can specify the line number, let's put this, let's see, let's look at our NAT table up here. We got that. Let's put that line number 1. The show NAT, it goes right at the top, 32.45, and then if you ping 111 source loopback 6, again, don't expect the ping to come back because R2 has no route to 32.45 that it now sees coming in from. And show NAT, you can see there's 1 translate hits for that IP. Okay, so the order becomes important when you have things like overlapping subnet or source subnets. So you always want to put the most specific IPs or type of NAT at the top. So as soon as they get matched first, that's what the ASA will use for the translation. I will create a separate video that talks about how you use the object NAT and Twice NAT together and what might be an appropriate use for it and what might be logical. So look out for that video. It might explain a little better as far as, you know, real life situation and how you would configure your NAT with the 2 types of NAT that you have available to you. So, and it might help you as far as migrating from the pre 8.3 type of command syntax and process or concept as well, where you don't really have to worry about all this order in the NAT table. So again, that wraps up our second type of NAT, our Twice NAT. And thank you for watching at LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video.